What's happening, YouTube? It's your homie S. Akuma coming back to you with another video. And in today's video is just a quick tournament report and recap of a recent tournament I had in Glassboro, New Jersey at the comic book store, which is also a Wreck and Rules home store. Shout out to those guys, real good group. And this tournament was featuring the SDCC San Diego Comic Con sealed pack for first place. So it was a top-heavy event, but it really made you come out and bring your most competitive deck, bring a strong mindset to want to come and take it all in first place. Now, first place was just that sealed pack. Second place was, I think, a box of whatever set you wanted. I guess you could even save it for store credit and use it for wave 3. Third and fourth were 12 packs. Fifth through eighth were 6 or 8 packs. So yeah, again, it was a top heavy event, but there was no splitting this time. First place, winner takes all, and that was the deal. So as you can see in front of you, I have Superion, which means I played, of course, Aeriabots for this event, and it did pretty well. And I'm going to talk about my matchups here in a second. I meant to play this deck like I mentioned in my last video, the last tournament, even before knowing and clearly seeing how many Insecticon players were in the room. I still decided to play Sentinels anyway, and my stubbornness made me pay for that by going 2-2 in that event, running into 2 Insecticons. One of those matchups were close, and the other one went how the matchup normally should go. But having to play both of them in a row was unfortunate, and yeah, it is what it is with that. So decided to play Superion for this event. I've been playing it on the low for a while, testing and tweaking builds. I'm solitaire by myself normally because I really don't have anyone to play test for tournaments with. I do play with Wads and those guys. Shout out to Sum 41. When I go on Thursdays and Fridays, but even then when I can't go there, I need some extensive testing, so I do a lot of solitaire games by myself, and that's all I can really get. Then the rest is just, it is what it is, and you kind of learn on the fly as you move into the tournaments. So with that being said, it was 5 rounds. There were 17 players, 5 rounds, 17 players, and cut to a top 8. And with that, I'll just jump right into the my rounds and talk about it some. Okay, so round 1, I played against Dinobots' good homie, Clayton. Forgot his last name, but shout out to Clayton. He's been tried and true playing Dinobots, I think, even since Wave 1. Yeah, I think he did play Predacons for one event, but for the most part, he's just known as the Dinobot guy. And I consider Dinobots a rogue deck, maybe possibly, tier 2. Grimlock does what Grimlock does and runs over guys and possibly kill even 2 bots in one turn. So deck's very powerful. Sludge was relevant because he kept healing off damage that I would put on, the Aeriabots only put on small incremental damage throughout the game, and then Sludge kind of helps heal it all. But so the way game 1 went was I controlled the game. I drew Inferno Breath early, so of course Inferno Breath is always good to tap down Fireflight, since Fireflight doesn't really get any attack value on its own without Armed Hovercraft and Press the Advantage, or the bigger they are, etc. And I think I got rid of Sludge early on, and then the game just pretty much came down to Superion versus Grimlock, and he got a really big swing with, I think, Grimlock with Erratic Lightning and Dino Chomp, and then got my Superion to 35, but it was his do or die turn, and he didn't get there, and then Superion was able to KO the Grimlock next turn, moving on to game 2. By the way, as I show my deck list throughout this recording, ignore that intelligence mission. Is that what it's called? Intelligence mission. I had a really big brain fart. I threw a one of it in my deck because just in case I ran into Sentinels, or this deck's hand count gets really low pretty fast, and I wanted to be able to refill my hand. So for whatever reason, I thought Fireflight was a specialist, and don't ask me what made me think he was a specialist, but I didn't even really actually look at the card clearly till I went into the tournament. I played it on Clayton game 1, and it tapped Fireflight, and he's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, what do you mean, what am I doing? And he's like, Fireflight's range. And I'm like, no, he isn't. Oh, yes, he is. You're right. So I had to tap down my Alpha Bravo, which lost value because Alpha Bravo has Pierce 2. So, yeah, don't make that mistake I did. And you probably won't. Good for you. I don't know exactly what I was thinking about. It was a last-minute change, too, before I got to the tournament. So the 3 pep talks were enough. And there's really no other draw card right now that besides the security console that's of value. But anyway, enough rambling. So yeah, the one intelligence mission was not a good move by myself. I think I took out Field Communicator for the one, and again, like I said, that was a bad move. So won't do that again. That card's coming out, so ignore that card. So again, with that, yeah, like I said, Superion was at 35 health, and I ended up still winning the game. Game 2, the meat of that game was I had 2 security checkpoints, 2 key security checkpoints that took his entire hand. The first time I took 3 cards. The second time he had Snarl in bot mode The card he drew, he just activated it so he can flip. I think it was an improvised shield. He activated it so he could flip the snarl and draw 2 cards, but he didn't play any other cards. So that telegraphed to me that he didn't have any actions. I don't feel like he wouldn't play an action that turn. You know, most of those actions in that deck you would play that turn off the top of my head. So him not doing that telegraphed to me that he had 2 upgrades in his hand that he drew. So on my next turn, I had another security checkpoint. I played that security checkpoint and then hit his, sure enough, 2 other upgrades. So he was just way too far behind. He wasn't able to activate an action and an upgrade every turn. Thus, his attacks were very weak. And then by the time Superion came out, he had, I think, 20-ish health on it. So, you know, 20-ish health, that it's going to take a while for you to, as you build up, so is my Superion, you know. So you have to, like, as I get a sparring gear, you might get a bashing shield, but you also still don't have a weapon on your Grimlock at that point because, you know, you're just top decking every turn. So, yeah, that match ended, excuse me, that game ended the match, and let's move on to the next round. Okay, so round 2, I played against an interesting deck. Now, the only thing that was changed is this is pretty much cars, you know, Bumblebee, Wheeljack, but instead of Prowl, he's using Fireflight. And it was actually very relevant in this matchup because if I started the game, I had attack into Fireflight, and I would most likely do no damage. If he went first, he would attack with Bumblebee, get some damage in, and then, you know, eventually use some type of buff card or whatever to tap the Fireflight. And, I think he was using untap effects like, you know, start your engines and turbo boosters. And then when the Fireflight finally was tapped down, as the bee untapped and you know, attack to attack, I would still have to attack the Fireflight, so I couldn't even target down the bee. And then all the while, his Wheeljack was still setting up to, you know, get buffed up to, you know, try to one-shot my bots. So it was very relevant, and that's kind of how it went for a while. But then at the same time, I think his Wheeljack only got in 1 solid attack, and then after that, I was able to dogpile on it with my Aeriabots and kill it with direct damage. And by the time I combined, I had a substantial amount of health on the Superion, so losing the Prowl over the Fireflight, I think, was very relevant because he didn't get that bold 2 on all his cars. But again, you know, early game, things were really slow to get started. But by the time I got Superion out, again, he had a lot of health and damage put together. All right. A lot of health left. So, you know, he wasn't able to come back from that. And then game 2 is pretty much of the same thing. The game just went really slow. He got to tap down his Fireflight, and then for a while I had to attack his Fireflight like 3 or 4 times. But then by the time I got Superion out, just his attacks, he would get buffed attacks, but I don't think he was playing Bashy Shield, and if he did, he would, you know, have his weapon and whatever, but I would have my armors, and I would be able to hold off enough of his push. So my Superion, again, had enough health on it to where it didn't really matter, you know, what he had at that point, and then I was able to just kind of, you know, run him down with the Superion and win the game. Okay, then round 3, I played against Insecticons, and Insecticons piloted by good old Frenchie from Wreck and Rule. So shout out to him. That game, you know, I was expecting some Insecticons, and I didn't mind playing against Insecticons because, of course, Aeriabots have a good matchup against it. And game 1 pretty much went like normal. You know, I think he kept his Scrapnel in alt mode because the 3 defense was very relevant, and it was hard for my bots to do anything without, you know, press the advantage or the bigger they are. So he had his Scrapnel in bot mode, or excuse me, in alt mode for most of the game, along with some of the other characters. He kind of he used Kickback's other effect at one point where you can when it damages an enemy, you can repair one from, you know, so it's kind of relevant. Like he would put like a grenade launcher or something on it and then attack, and then it healed, and, you know, he was just doing some things you don't normally see from the deck. But at one point, the key point to this game 1, he activated One Shot Stand and then activated Reckless Charge in the same turn, and he killed like one of my bots with the direct damage, and then he attacked down with the Reckless Charge, and I just didn't catch it. So, and if you didn't either just yet, he activated 2 actions in one turn. Don't know how that really just slipped my mind. I guess I get is there such thing as being overly focused on the game or just not paying attention? But it's weird though, because I catch things like when my opponent doesn't flip an extra card for Flame War, or, you know, Tough or whatever for Bold, or they have a white and they just flip 2 and they forget to flip 2 more. I always remind my opponents of that or whatever. I never miss those type of things, but sometimes when the actual gameplay, I think in my head, he activated 2 cards, so it felt like to me he played an action and an upgrade. Like, I still kind of have a Yu-Gi-Oh frame of mind, because in Yu-Gi-Oh you're able to activate 1,000,000 cards per turn. You're not restricted to 1 and 1. So that's something I still need to get used to, despite how long I've been playing the game and, you know, the experience I've had with tournaments. But that's something that's going to cost me, because, you know, I'm going to Origins. Spoiler alert. Wasn't going to announce it just yet, but now I'm definitely going 100%. So yeah, going to Origins. and no matter where I'm at, even for fun games, you know, there's something you don't want to miss. So make sure you pay attention to what your opponent's doing, whether it's flipping 2 bots in one turn. Speaking of that, I had another match on my channel, a Sentinel Mirror match, where he, on his last turn, he flipped Optimus, and then, excuse me, he flipped Hot Rod to deal 1 damage, and then flipped Optimus. Now, that was his do or die turn because his Optimus had like very low health, and my Optimus still had a good bit of health on it. And I think, honestly, in my mind, I kind of didn't care what he did as long as it wasn't grenade reckless charge, which I knew it wasn't going to be to that extent because I saw his hand or something like that throughout the, you know, later turns with Espionage or Mirage. So I was so confident that he wasn't going to KO my bot that I kind of didn't care what he did, but I should care because, like, if I would have lost that game, you know, I would have been really tight about it. So something to pay attention to. And then I know in another one of my games, Henry Rico from Greylock on his channel, I played for, you know, against him on his channel, and he activated incoming transmission, and he drew 3 cards, but he drew all 3 cards like one right after another. It wasn't like he drew 1, 2, and then there was a pause, and then he drew the 3rd one like he was trying to cheat. I don't think it was intentional. But shout out to him and the Team Greylock, real cool group of guys. But yeah, just little things like that. For some reason, I brain fart on a lot, so I got to make sure I pay attention and wake up because I don't need that costing me in these big tournaments coming up at Origins. By the way, I'm very excited for that. So yeah, played against him, and so Frenchie, being the good man that he is, he was honest enough to let me know a turn later. He's like, I scoop, and I'm like, why are you scooping? Like, music to my ears, but I'm like, wait, what do you mean you scoop? And he's like, I activated 2 actions in one turn, 1 shot stand and reckless charge. And I sat back and thought, I'm like, you know what, you did, because my field looked a little weird. My field was like 2 guys left to his 3, and no matter what he's doing, I shouldn't have less guys than he has that early. Something felt off about that, and that's exactly what it was, because he activated those 2 powerful actions in one turn with, you know, there was no brainstorm. So with that, we just moved to game 2, and then game 2 was actually still pretty close. He kept Scrapnel unflipped to alt mode just about the entire time, and it was actually very relevant because I kind of focused on his other bots and not Scrapnel. So when it was Superion versus Scrapnel, he was able to flip it, and the Scrapnel was at full health, meaning I had to get 2 attacks in minimum, you know, 3 without direct damage, and to kill it. But I ended up still getting through. Scrapnel just attacking every turn. I think his most threatening bot, when everything is said and done, is Barrage. If it's Barrage versus Superion, I might be in trouble. But just Scrapnel, unless he has, like, you know, a grenade launcher and supercharge or something every turn consistently, I'm not really worried about Scrapnel. So I was able to pull out the win. So that game ended up being just 2 games, and let's move on to the next round. All right, then round 4. Round 4 was a mirror match. I don't have an extra set of Aeriabots on hand, so I'm not going to put them versus each other. But I played against Kyle Gant of Wrecking Rule. Shout out to him, real cool guy. And this match just pretty much came down to focusing on direct damage and pierce. Of course, most of our attacks weren't going to go through. You might get an air raid with a Noble's Blaster to hit for 1 or 2 damage, but other than that, it was just a race for damage. Because once we both I'm fusing words today. Once we both combined into Superion, it's just Pierce 3. The 3 damage, 3 damage, 3 damage, 3 minutes. So by the time both Superions come out, whoever has the most damage on their bot is going to lose because it's a race to, you know, I'm hitting you for guaranteed 3 every turn. We both have a reinforced plating or sparring gear on us. So we're going to defend for a lot, but you still get through with that Pierce 3. And that's what it ended up coming down to. I think we both saw Inferno Breath. He Inferno Breath me. The next turn I answered back with my Inferno Breath, both on our Fireflights. And then I think I had 2 armed hovercraft. So that clearly put me ahead because that was 10 damage total on all, well, 13 if you count the Inferno Breath. So I had 3, and then 1 on all 5 of his bots, and then another armed hovercraft, excuse me, on all 5 of his bots again. So that put me way ahead. So by the time we were able to combine, he was at like 23-ish health, and I was maybe only like at 14. So every turn it was just my 3 versus his 3 Pierce, and eventually I was able to get to 39. So it took like a couple of, like, maybe 5, 6, 7 more turns after that, you know, each, or okay, maybe not each. The math was at 24. I'm not gonna do the math, but it was a lot of turns in between that because we were just, you know, trading of my Vaporize on his Noble Blaster, you know, and then or he'd get another Noble Blaster and then equipped it. If he would have got Pearson Blaster, he might have beat me in the race because then he would have been 6 Pierce 6. Now, speaking of that, that's something on a side note to keep in mind for side decking. If you run into an Aeriabot mirror match, you can side deck more Piercing Blasters or Piercing Blaster in general, or that new card that's coming out, you know, in Wave 3, that Cutlass card. Now, you'll probably main deck that card anyway, but that's the Fusion Cannon of Megatron for 7 stars or lower. It's a blue icon, it's a weapon, it gives +1 attack to you know, a bot 7 stars or lower, and it gives Pierce 3. So it's pretty much Piercing Blaster, but a better Piercing Blaster because it's blue and it gives +1 attack. So with that, that's what ended up happening in game 1, and then game 2 was honestly much of the same thing. He had an Inferno Breath early. I had to find one of mine later on, and I did get it. So we were still kind of neck and neck, maybe 1 damage off each. And then I think we also both saw an arm hovercraft, but I can't remember exactly what it was that gave me the edge, but I ended up still having the edge over him in damage. And then it was just, again, Superion, a race to deal 3, who can deal 3 the fastest. There were some turns where I had Noble's Blaster on my Superion, and so mine's at 8, and then I also had Vaporized, so I vaporized his armor, and then so now he's 1 defense, tough 2, so I might have actually got him more damage than 3 a couple of times. And then also what was also relevant was grabbing Enigma every time you saw it off your flips, because you could play your action and at least deal 1 damage. So you're dealing 4 instead of 3 that turn, and that's what ended up happening. So yeah, I was able to have less damage on my Superion than he did, and just win the race until it finally got him to 39 to win the match. Okay, then round five at this point, it didn't really matter who won. The only thing that would change was, so first of all, I played against RJ. Shout out to him, very cool guy. He's been playing cards since I can remember. He's always played this deck, and even switching into wave 2, he switched out the Bumblebees, and he's been definitely on point with his deck builds and his excellent play. Excuse me, excellent play. So going into this round, he was 3-1. He lost to, okay, need some water. He lost to Kyle Gant and his Aeriabots earlier in the match, or earlier in the day, rather. So coming into this match, he was 3-1. I was undefeated. So the only thing that mattered was, I was going to be first seed no matter what after this game, win or lose. If I were to beat him, then the only thing that would change for him is if he got 3rd or 4th or 5th place, and thus it'll change who he plays in top, because 1 plays 8, 2 plays 7, 3 plays 6, and 4 plays 5. So with this matchup, what ended up happening was, I think I won a dice roll. I decided to go first, my first mistake, and I'll get to that later. And I flipped Alpha Bravo or whatever, and I attacked Skydive into Bumblebee because I know he's going to send Bumblebee in. So I get 1 damage on Bumblebee. But where it starts to go downhill for me is he sends Bumblebee in. He flips it, plays a flamethrower or something, and he attacks, draws 2 cards with the Bumblebee, and puts a good bit of damage on my Skydive. So it's like, okay, I go, and pretty much it was a race to, he kept getting rid of my armors every time I had a bashing shield. But one of the most important things about this matchup was he was able to keep Wheeljack in alt mode the entire time to sift through his deck and get his starter engines and turbo boosters as he needed them. He had key turns where he used Prowl's effect with Starcher Engines and Bumblebee to flip everybody back, give everybody Bold 3. He would flip Bumblebee back and attack again with, Grenade Launcher or Erratic Lighting plus, the Bold 2 in Supercharge or whatever, because he was able to activate another action off of Bumblebee's effect, which is very devastating. And what ended up happening was every one of my attacks had to go at either Prowl or Bumblebee, because he kept untapping, and he kept his, unless I did direct damage to it, his Wheeljack was untouched. And also being in alt mode means I can't use marksmanship on it either. So my marksmanship plays weren't as valuable, because, I would hit Bumblebee or Prowl, the guys I don't want to hit. And that was very relevant. So by the time I got to Maximus, or getting having shades of Optimus and Sentinels over here. See, I need to go back to my deck. But by the time I got to Superion, it was Wheeljack versus Superion, but he would have a bashing shield on it, so he had 2 defense in bot mode, and every time he attacked me, he had Bolt 3, and if he had a grenade launcher or an erratic lighting plus supercharge, 8 Bolt 6 is ridiculous, and my Superion just can't handle that, and I ended up losing that game. And then game 2 is much of the same. Clearly didn't learn my lesson from game 1. Game 2, I ended up going first again, and it was kind of much of the same thing. He was able to hide his Bumblebee, and for whatever reason, I had a brain fart. Did not think about having him go first. I should have had him go first, but I will touch on that more once I get to the end of the story, or the end of the report, rather. So with that, I ended up losing that match 0-2. So I went 8-2 in games the entire day, and only losing to RJ and moving in the top. Kind of shake it off. It's like, all right, I'm going in the top. It's all good. And moving on from there, let's jump into the top 8 and let's talk about it. All right, guys. So before I get into my top 8 match, I just would want to point out something that I don't know if they're necessarily doing this for Origins and like all big events, but apparently they do this in Magic, and there's very valuable perks to getting first place. In Yu-Gi-Oh, I'm not used to this. In Yu-Gi-Oh, we had what was called, first of all, an undefeated streak, and the undefeated curse rather, and that was the player that went undefeated throughout the Swiss rounds would could easily just lose in top 32, or would easily lose in top 32, the very first round of top single elimination, and just be out of the tournament like that. And all you get is a mat. So all that work you did, going undefeated the entire tournament just to lose, that curse was finally broken a couple years ago, and then you know, it was kind of never a thing again because I think 2 other people did it. But getting back into this game, what they do is first place, you get to pick who goes first throughout the entire top cut, and not necessarily just first place, but anybody. So when 1 plays 8, first seed gets to pick. When 2 plays 7, second place gets to pick. When 3 plays 6, third place gets to pick, and so on and so forth. And then even in top 4 and top 2, you're also able to pick who goes first. So if you're first seed throughout the entire top, you get to pick who goes first, the second, in top 8, top 4, and the finals. So that was a nice perk. Again, if they're doing that for Origins, that makes you it should make you wary that you should possibly you know, not give your opponent the win and just play it out, especially if your opponent's already going to top anyway, because you being first seed going into top, if you can pick who goes first every time, first or second, that's very good just to start the game and get the tempo in your favor. So I'm really curious to see if that's how it's going to pan out with that. But he was following the guy that ran the tournament was following you know, how Magic does it, Magic Protocol. So that's a nice little switch coming into this game, and very appreciative of it because, you know, I ended up being first seed, so that was a blessing. All right, so jumping into the game, I played against a deck I haven't played since Wave 1. I remember playing against this deck, Thundercracker, Nemesis Prime, and Flame War, with double primes, and I got demolished. His Thundercracker, you know, I focused on Nemesis, and his Thundercracker just beat me down with, you know, brainstorm plays and yeah, brainstorm plays into like leap into battles and get into these ridiculously high attacks, and just beating down on my Optimus, or, you know, whatever it was. So I have a bad memory of this deck, bad experience against this deck, but I kind of get my revenge here, try to get my revenge anyway, by playing against this deck in top 8. So pretty much the synopsis of this match was, even with his Thundercracker being so, you know, having such a high attack, my bots were able to defend for a lot because I had armors on him. Any armors I put in play always stuck, because him being a predominantly blue heavy deck, he doesn't play bashing shields. So unless he hard drew Vaporize was his only out to my armors. Thus, I was able to defend for a lot. His Flame War attacks almost never did anything. Even with the bigger they are, they wouldn't do anything. Now, he did have Scoundrel's Blaster, as well as my Noble's Blaster. Both have relevance in this matchup because they both deal Pierce 2 respectively against the opponents, because, you know, he's all Decepticons and I'm all Autobots. So besides that, Flame War really didn't do anything. His Thundercracker attacks weren't much. He did get his Nemesis to 10, but with Scoundrel's Blaster, so he's a 12 Pierce 2. But even then, you know, by the time Superion came out, Superion had like 15 or less damage on it. So 15 or less damage, it was a slow game even then with Superion running in, you know, at Pierce 3. But by the time I got Noble's Blaster on it, now I'm an 8 Pierce 5, you know, and kind of sped the game up a little bit to get it over with. But yeah, his deck just wasn't able to do a lot of damage throughout the early turns, and that's what helped me win game 1. And game 2, honestly, was just about the same thing. We're not having side decks, so he wasn't able to side deck heavy-handeds or anything like that to help with the matchup or anything like that. So by the time, again, Superion came out, he had 20 or less damage on it, and I was able to eventually just, you know, pierce him to death and get the KO to move on to top 4. Okay, so in top 4, I played against the Decepticons again by the same pilot, good old Frenchie. Shout out to Frenchie and Wreck and Rule. Again, this matchup, you know, I'm definitely very comfortable with. And both games were about the, it was pretty much about Scrapnel versus Superion in the end. You know, we all played our cards right. We had Scrapnel in alt mode for most of the game. And by the time it was down to Superion, I think, you know, 2 attacks and I think an Enigma ended up KOing them. And they were still pretty close even then. You know, he had his, he played his reckless charges on his, you know, his ransack, and if I didn't kill the ransack when it finally stood, it was able to attack for a lot because, you know, he had a lot of damage counters on him. And overall, it was a solid match. But, you know, in the end, Superion just has a great matchup against the bugs, and with my direct damage and things like that, I was able to take it down and move on to the finals. All right, now we had the finals. It's me versus Cars. Now, at this point, I am 12-2 in games. All my games were all 2-0s. And, well, yeah, 2-0s, and my only 2 losses were against Cars in round 5. So I'm 12-2 in games. I'm honestly not feeling super confident in this match because, for one, I haven't played against it. When I do Solitaire by myself, I'm Solitaire in Sentinels versus Aeriabots most of the time. I might Solitaire Insecticons versus Aeriabots just to get the matchup down, or my Sentinels versus, you know, my against Insecticons. So it's kind of like round robin with just those 3. I kind of got to branch out and realize there are other decks in the format, you know, of course, like Dinobots and Cars. But so not really have ever played against this matchup, despite even playing in round 5. Of course, I had the option to go first or second. I choose to go first again, even despite realizing what happened round 5. You know, I chose to go first both games. I lost game 1, and in game 2 I decided to go first, and for some reason I still decided to go first again here. Despite me going to play poker and being a gambler, I was not trying to gamble going second, because I just had a brain fart. You know, it's very clear to see and very easy to see that if I were to have him go first, his Bumblebee would have to attack into my Fireflight. That's one wasted attack. Then I go and I attack with Skydive. When Skydive attacks into B, now unless he has an untap effect to untap the B, my his Prowl would have to attack next into my Skydive, which would be another wasted attack, quote unquote, because unless he gets big enough to, you know, put some damage on Skydive, I'll still have just about no damage on me. And then on my next turn, you know, I'll attack with whoever, but then he still has to attack Fireflight again, because from turn 1, B didn't kill the Fireflight. You know, if I'm able to tap it, my Fireflight down with Inferno Breath or whatever the case is. So again, I decided to go first. Now the game ended up actually being very close. And let me actually back up and stop right there and back up for a second. Pre-match, RJ, shout out to you. Very, very cool guy. This man asks me before the tournament, or excuse me, before the match, do I have the pack? And I say, no, I don't have the pack. I really don't have the pack, you know. And he says, well, I have the pack. He's like, so I'd rather you have it, and I'll just take the store credit for wave 3. Because, you know, whatever the case is, he didn't feel like the hassle of selling the pack or anything like that. And he just rather me, in general, just have the pack since I didn't have it. Now, I did have the characters at one point, but I sold them a long while ago, because I needed the money for personal reasons. So, and plus, I always did want all of them. I wanted the tandem targeting system and the tandem targeting system and the, what's the other one? All out attacks. So I wanted all of them for my collection, because I wanted one of every character, you know. So even if I were to, well, I don't want to say quit this game, I might sell some things, but there were certain cards that I definitely know I just wanted for my collection to have if I were to ever leave this game. Don't plan on leaving for a long time, by the way. I'm here to stay for a while and get some very competitive TCG playing in. But anyway, so he let me have the pack prior to the game, so I said that's cool, and it was getting kind of late. But I was like, you know what, can we still just play, especially for the camera, and you know, and just still play for a definitive winner. So I'm so focused on the match, you know, I'm playing throughout the match, game 1, game 2, and game 3, that I forget to click the record button. So guys, forgive me, thumbs down. I know that sucks. I forget to click, or I thought I clicked it, and you know, I just never happened to look at the screen, not even halfway or a quarter of the way through game 1, and I did not get the finals. So I didn't get round 1 as well, by the way. I got some matches to post, and not all just me, by the way, but yeah, the game round 1 I didn't get between me and Clayton or whoever was going to be on the feature match, because some of the Magic guys came in and we weren't able to kind of set up or whatever. But then I saw there was going to be some space after the Magic guys got to their migrated to their own space, so I was able to get round every round but the first and the last. So forgive me for not getting that, but just know RJ kicked my butt. So game 1 I did end up going first, and I ended up winning barely though. Game 2, now see, game 2 is really where I should have woke up, because game 2 he has choice who goes first or second, and he said you can go first. So at that point, I'm like, what? I can go first? That's what I want, sure. Because I was just so one-track mind, I'm not going to lie. In this game right now, along with those things of being cheated unintentionally, but, you know, I have to, I got to wake up. I don't know what my issue is with this game, and just, like, I get so focused on the bots and all the flipping and everything. There's so much going on that I just, I forget. So I need to wake up, clearly. But, yeah, he says I can go first. So at that point, you know, so I lost game 2. And then at that point, I should have said, all right, game 3, this is for all the marbles. You know what? You go first. Nope. Still decided to go first again. And even despite that, it's not like if I go first, I'm going to lose automatically. But that thing I explained earlier with the bee attacking into the my skydive with a, you know, an action or whatever, and being able to control the tempo with his untap effects and hide the wheeljack from marksmanship and all that was very relevant. So the matchup still ended up coming down to wheeljack versus Superion. And oh, by the way, like, even when Superion came out, throughout all those games I played against RJ, all 5 games, when Superion came out, I had to kind of like spread my damage so bad that when Superion came out, the 3 damage didn't even kill anybody. So it was like 3 damage on a guy, and it's like, well, I have to go attack it to kill it, but it wasn't Wheeljack because I couldn't get at Wheeljack because, you know, I can only attack the Prowl or the B. So that was just very bad on my part. It took me to get my butt kicked to learn my lesson, and I did. Because after the match, he said, yeah, you should have had me go second. And I'm like, I thought about it, but I was too scared to take the gamble. I was just too scared. And playing scared, that's what that gets me. But either way, you know, I walked away with the pack only because RJ is very cool, and he just came to have fun overall. And, you know, hey, I appreciate the hospitality. So with that, RJ wins the event. RJ wins the event with cars. You know, I go... do it very well with the Aeriabot deck. Going into side decking into Origins, I don't know. Well, I'm not gonna say I don't know, but Aeriabots might have a tough time, but then they might not. And I say they might have a tough time because the card's like cornered. But then when I think about, at first it sounded really good. You know, Aeriabots, they flip every turn, and then you cornered them and flip them back and set them back. So now you find one cornered. Now it's turn 6 till they combine, unless they happen to hit Silverbolt's effect. You know, now it's turn 6 till they combine. You get another corner, you know, being that it's a green icon, now it's turn 7 till they combine, and so on and so forth. But every turn that you're playing a corner, that means you're not playing Leap into Battle, Reckless Charge, One Shall Stand, etc. So you only have your upgrade to really boost. And if I still have all my, you know, if I'm still solid with defense, like with my armors and things like that, then you're really not still doing that much damage. So all you're doing is just delaying the inevitable. That's what it sounds like in theory. At first, in theory, corners sounded very good. Now it's like, is it really going to be that good? You could side things like Espionage against Aeriabots, but the best hand controlling deck in the game right now, Sentinels, steals their entire hand, and then all Aeriabots need is just one card in hand to be able to trade for Enigma on defense. And it happens so often that, you know, by the time Superion still comes out, it's very tough for Sentinels. So if Sentinels can't do it with Mirage, if they can't do it and win anyway with Mirage and Combat Commands and Espionage, then no other deck just simply siding Espionage to go steal one Enigma, because they should have 2, the Aeriabot player, by time the turn before they combine, you know, is going to do enough. Now, I'm not going to say Sentinels has a bad matchup all of a sudden against Aeriabots. It still has a very good matchup. I think it's a 60-40, but if they can get out Superion, it is really tough for the Sentinels to win. So with that being said, guys, I appreciate you all being here and hanging out with me, listening to my tournament report. Shout out once again to RJ for being a really cool guy and being the champion of the day. You are the man. And expect some tournament footage coming up from that tournament. The first 2 rounds are Aeriabots, but that was unintentional. I had Kyle Gant and his opponent play on the camera, and he was playing Aeriabots. I thought he was playing Metroplex. I didn't, you know, realize what he was playing at the time. But so that game, and then I think I'm playing on there around 3 or round 2, something like that, either round 2 or round 4. So there are a couple of Aeriabot matches on there, which is nice variety because they're against 2 different matchups. And then I think I have all of Wrecking Rule on there. So Joe, Brian, and Frenchie. So you get to see Brian for the first time in his, you know, in a competitive tournament, and see how he plays and what he played. So I'll leave you guys with that. Also, excuse me, expect tournament footage from Origins as well. You know, I want to start my player profile series, and what that series is I just get some, you know, I pick a player and pick their brain about what they think about the game, how they started the game, their favorite card, their card they dislike the most, if they were to win the Origins tournament, or if they were to go and to win the Origins tournament, or even the Energine Invitational or Gencon or whichever. What character card would they create, and possibly could you give me an effect off the top of your head, or something, you know, a range of what you would try to make that effect, or, you know, make a deck better, a faction better, a new Grimlock or whatever. And so, you know, about 10 questions, and just pick their brain about the game and go from there. So I think that'll be pretty cool, so you can kind of get in the mind and kind of get a closer one-on-one with these players and get familiar with them. So that way, of course, when you go to tournaments, you're like, oh man, I remember seeing that guy and he talked about this and that, and, you know, start a whole plethora of new conversations, even just about that. So expect that coming up soon. Bear with me with my video posting. I know I'm pretty slow lately, but hang in there with me. With that being said, I'm gonna leave you guys with that. You guys have a great night. Again, I appreciate you guys being here. This is SDCC heading out. Peace.